Góðan og blessaðan daginn öll sömul og velkomin á málstofu raunfærni mat í háskólum. Þessi málstefna gerð möguleg í gegnum samstarf við NVFL, Nordisk Vuxenlærende, norrænt net nám fullorðinna. Það vill svo skemmtilega til að eitt af netum þessa netverks, þetta svona fullt af fólki sem hittist í alls konar netverkum, í alls konar verkefnum sem tengjast fullorðinsfræðslu, námi fullorðinna. Og þarna, I think I'll change over to English because we have some friends who are visiting with us and will honoring us with their presence. I'm just telling them about how this conference is possible. And the reason for this conference is that some of you are here. We have some experts on the validation of prior learning and a committee at the University of Iceland, which was started by the University of Iceland, but we are working with other universities as well, where we are discussing these questions about what can we do about validation of prior learning, what do Icelandic universities need to consider concerning the validation of prior learning. So we're really starting our work, and we were so lucky to have these people here, so we decided to call all of you together and ask you to think with us. This is a process which will take some time. We need to find out what is interesting for Icelandic universities concerning this. So that's why we have this conference and why this committee is working. And so we're trying to give to you some of the knowledge that the Scandinavian people who have been working together for many years on validation of prior learning, and so that we can learn a bit from them. We hope to have some discussions, but we have so many experts here that we are going to mainly listen. But I hope you've noticed that in front of you there's a piece of paper and some post-it notes with 4 cells on the paper. One says, what does it say? Ávinningur. Hver ávinningurinn af því að vera með sem sagt raunfærni mat á háskólastigi? Hver eru áskorarnirnar? Það annar reitur, þriðji reiturinn þetta finnst mér áhugavert og svo spurningar. So what I'd like to ask you is if you find anything interesting, see any hindrances possible, any questions for the people who have something to say, would you please write them on a post-it and post them on the paper, and then maybe some of the questions will find their way into the plenum. But we will photograph everything and make it available to you, and we'll be using it in our work. But we need to start this officially, so we're so happy to have the rector of our university. So, Jón Atli, would you please come and start this so we can really, make it official? Thank you very much.
Takk Róbjartur og innilega velkomin. Dear guests, I would like to welcome you to the University of Iceland. Although we are not strictly here at the university is basically next door. And to our Nordic friends, welcome to Iceland. It's my privilege and honor to address you briefly here at the opening of this seminar about the valuation of prior learning. Throughout history, people have put much effort into strengthening and training their professional skills. Once it was considered sufficient to complete a qualification to gain a job and status in society, today this is not enough. As a more flexible society requires individuals to constantly adapt and improve their skills and abilities. In today's learning society, the demand for adaptable and accessible education is increasing. Staying on top of this change and development is important, both for individuals, the labor market, the higher education institutions, and the regulation bodies to keep the society capable in today's environment. Those who have gained skills through non-formal and informal channels often find it difficult to have their knowledge recognized when they intend to continue their education in a more formal setting. With evaluation of prior learning, evaluating the skills individuals have gained through informal ways becomes an option, and with that, a door might open for them to continue their education. This has been done in Iceland, as in many other countries, at the vocational training level, with great success in the past few years. The next step is to evaluate how the use of evaluation of prior learning can assist the universities in opening their doors to a broader group of students, or even the possibility of shortening studies. To assess the possible options of implementing evaluation of prior learning in the Icelandic higher education sector, a working group has been formed, as was discussed previously, headed by Ina Dögg Eyþórsdóttir of the University of Iceland. One of the first jobs of this group is this seminar, where work group members and others come together to hear from our Nordic neighbors about their experiences and to discuss valuation of prior learning in higher education. I wish you a very fruitful seminar, and thank you very much. Have a great day.
This was the rector of the university, Jón Atli Benediktsson. Thank you very much. We have a very, let's say, simple program. We are starting out with a big context, why on earth? And then we're going a bit more narrower, what has been happening in Iceland? And then we're looking over to what has been happening in the Scandinavian countries. So you all have the program in front of you. So you'll see we have two Icelandic people starting off who will be talking in Icelandic, I think. And something happened there. And then after that, we'll have 4 Scandinavian inputs where they will share with us the work that they have been doing, mainly in á framhaldsskólastigi, videregående skole. What has been happening there concerning validation of prior learning. So to start off, we have Una Strand Viðarsdóttir, who is our representative in EU matters. She works at the Ministry of Education, and she's one of those who has been working, for example, on the Yerevan, what's it called? Yerevan yfirlýsingin, the Yerevan Declaration, and where European universities are asked to consider, or expected to consider, the validation of prior learning. So, Una Strand Viðarsdóttir, would you please join us here? Thank you.
God dag. Kära nordiska vänner, det är väldigt trevligt att få er hit, trots det kalla vädret. Det är ganska tråkigt här ute. But actually, really in contradiction to what you just said, I've been instructed to speak in English, so I will. So I shall start again in English this time. Now, dear friends, fellow enthusiasts on appropriate recognition of prior learning in higher education, let me start, I think, by saying that I'm extremely happy to see this workshop taking place and that the recognition of prior learning is being discussed at the higher education level here in Iceland. Because here, same as in the rest of Europe really, the focus has very much been on other school levels so far, especially those, of course, who are engaged in vocational education and training, as was mentioned earlier. I should say, though, that vocational educational training in Iceland in general is not at higher education level, although there are some changes afoot. it looks like things might change, and we might get some of that moving up into higher education soon. Now, my name is Una Strand Viðarsdóttir. I work as a senior advisor at the Ministry of Education, Science and Culture here in Iceland. And apart from being a nerd of all things higher educational, be it quality assurance or recognition, I'm also our representative, our national representative to the BFUG, the Bologna Follow-Up Group. And that, if you don't know what it is an administrative arm of the European higher education area. I should also say that I co-chaired that entire shebang in the run-up to the last ministerial meeting, which was the one in Yerevan that you mentioned earlier. And so therefore I'm more, I suppose, than partially to blame for the emphases and work plans for the years leading up to the next ministerial, which will be in Paris in 2018. Now, I should say that recognition of prior learning in higher education has actually been on the radar for the European higher education area for quite some time, as has the establishment of systems for recognition and validation of all forms of learning, not just the prior learning we're discussing here. And I should say maybe because we're all from different backgrounds, and although most people here work in higher education, I should say that when we talk about prior learning in English, because we're not all used to using the same phrases in different languages, you could imagine that prior learning could be applied to all matters of learning, and of course it could be, whether it be formal or non-formal or informal, but it is most often used to describe learning other than that achieved through recognised formal education programmes. And so it includes, of course, learning through work experience, through life experience, through activities in voluntary associations, through religious, charitable, cultural associations, arts activities, political work, sports activities, all sorts of non-recognised formal education programmes, and there's an awful long list of et ceteras that comes after this. And like Jón Atli said before me, as we move really from a culture when one used to be originally trained for a job for life to one that then allows for and expects an individual to have a succession of jobs throughout their career, not always such similar jobs, often quite different ones, it's become increasingly important to develop a reliable and an efficient system to recognise and validate all of those skills that are acquired through such prior learning. And that this is done so that those who wish to be employed and employable in a very fast evolving work environment can actually constantly develop their knowledge and their skills through learning activities. And in this case, we're talking about higher education. And when we talk about recognition, we're not just talking about me realizing that you've done this work, or that you've been part of this political movement, or that you've led your scout troop, or that you've worked as a plumber for so and so long, etc., etc., but that it's actually recognized as a formal acknowledgement by a competent authority of the value of that as an educational qualification, with a view to either gaining access to education or to employment activities. Now, I said before that the recognition of prior learning has been on the radar of the EHEA, or the European Higher Education area, for quite some time. And it was been integrated in the Bologna process. And the Bologna process, of course, is the process that integrates higher education throughout Europe and beyond. 48 countries are included in the Bologna collaboration. And since 2005, the ministers in the Bologna countries made a very clear reference to this after the meeting in Bergen, in Norway. And they said, we'll work with higher education institutions and others to improve recognition of prior learning and, where possible, non-formal and informal learning for access to and as elements in, and that's quite important, higher education programs. If you look through all the consecutive meetings of ministers, you'll find that similar statements are included in subsequent communiques, concluding in the latest one from Yerevan in 2015, where the ministers of the then all 48 countries commit to remove obstacles to the recognition of prior learning for the purposes of providing access to higher education programs and facilitating the award of qualifications on the basis of prior learning. This is actually a shift, an entire qualification on the basis of prior learning. as well as encouraging higher education institutions to improve their capacity to recognise prior learning. So it's important, it's up there, it's been going through for a long time, and we're really, not just us, but in general, we're quite, in Europe, quite late on the uptake with this when it comes to higher education. So what has actually happened in the decade and a bit that this issue has been on the EHEA radar and the radar of the Bologna education ministers, who of course are the ones who should be following it through? Now the answer is, of course, that in some countries things have gone reasonably well, and those countries are in part represented by the speakers here today. However, in others, and in many others, the implementation has been very piecemeal, it's been incomplete, it's been non-existent, and the recognition by prior learning is often met by incomprehension by academic staff, by employers, and by others whose conception of qualifications are predominantly formal. So we're getting there somewhere, we're getting there slowly, and in some places we're getting there faster than in others, and in some places we're just not moving at all. Here in Iceland, actually, the Act on Higher Education from 2006 allows explicitly for the recognition of prior learning. It states, and I quote, that higher education institutions may accept students who possess an equivalent level of maturity and knowledge as assessed by the relevant institution. That means equivalent to the formal qualification that came in the sentence before in that particular act. But there is very little centralized comparative data available on how this is being done in practice, nor indeed how many students come into higher education via this route. And from what we do know, it seems that it's done on a case-by-case basis, and there is limited consistency of recognition between institutions. So there's a job to be done. Now, I'm going to get back to the EHEA, because that's what I was asked to speak about. On the European level, there was a network on the recognition of prior learning that was established, and that was established with a view of improving policy and practice throughout the EHEA on this matter. But it has been felt that the network also provided very insufficient evidence of success of its endeavours. And indeed, in 2015, it was deemed to no longer be an appropriate instrument for furthering the recognition of prior learning within the EHEA, and it's no longer part of the European Higher Education Area Work Programme. Now, just because you decide that something is not part of your toolbox anymore doesn't mean that the issue is going away. And indeed, the emphasis, of course, in the European higher education area at the moment is one on implementation of core commitments, but it is also one, if you go back and you read the Yerevan Communiqué, on inclusion, dialogue, employability, and therefore access. So this is not an issue that we should be tucking away. According to a Council recommendation from 2012, EU member states should have in place, no later than 2018, which is very soon, arrangements for the validation of non-formal and informal learning, which is linked to the national qualification frameworks and should enable individuals to obtain full or partial recognition of qualifications on the basis of validated learning experiences. And we know that what comes to member states soon comes to us too. There are smaller things happening within the Bologna cooperation, which still focus on prior learning, such as the commitment in the latest communiqué to include short cycle qualifications in the overarching framework of qualifications that came in 2015. The new ECTS Users Guide includes an entire section on recognition of prior learning and experiences. And you could indeed say that the entire focus on student learning, student-centered learning, provides in its own way a demand for better access and recognition. And having said that, there's no group currently working under Bologna with a specific focus on social dimension and lifelong learning, although there is a strategy in place for these developed by the previous working group. The organisation of the Bologna collaboration has actually changed quite a lot in the last year or so, and instead of a large number of networks and working groups, the European higher education area is focusing its work within a simplified structure with fewer entities and a greater focus on peer learning and peer support. And this is all aimed at and in the lead up to the anticipated recommendations on what to do with countries that do not implement the core commitments of the Bologna process in 2018. And I should add that I'm also in charge of coming up with recommendations of what to do with those countries. And because of that, there's a massive focus now on peer support. There are some notable efforts on peer learning activities that focus on this topic. for example, rather surprisingly in Russia. But there are limitations to the way in which countries and stakeholders can actually participate in such meetings, because peer learning activities take place normally in a different country, etc., and they are difficult to get to and participate in. That having been said, the issue is driven both nationally and internationally by other sectors. And unless we manage to really grab the bull by its horns and address how we best recognise prior learning, both nationally and eventually internationally and across borders, and to develop good procedures to do so, we really risk to be left with a problem that we need to solve or will be made to solve very quickly and very hastily. And I think that's what we need to think about, the fact that it's better to move now than to wait, to be told to move. And I think on that note, I'll just wish you a great meeting. I look forward to a very interesting discussion. Let that be enough for now. Thank you.
And ég ætla að fá að minna ykkur á að ef ykkur dettur ykkur í hug spurningar, athugasemdir, að endilega nota gulu miðana til að skrifa og setja á blöðin ykkar, og svo mun ég örugglega einhvern tímann biðja athuga hvort það sé einhverjar spurningar. En ég ætla að fá að halda áfram og við erum með næstan á dagskrá Hauk Harðarson. Hann hjá Fræðslumiðstöð atvinnulífsins. En þar hefur hann og Fjóla Lárusdóttir, þau hafa unnið mjög ötullega undanfarin ár af því að hanna í raun og veru raunfærni mat á Íslandi, og hann mun segja ykkur frá því. Þannig að, ladies and gentlemen, Haukur Harðarson.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in Icelandic. I think the Nordic friends, they know maybe more about the situation in Iceland, about validation, because we meet every 3 or 4 times each year and report to each other. But nú skiptum við yfir íslensku. Og ég ætla aðeins að gera grein fyrir hvar við erum, og okkar markhópur fyrst og fremst þau sem hafa ekki lokið framhaldsskólanámi og hafa yfirleitt byrjanám. Og ég verð dálítið í tölum og svoleiðis pælingum, en við sjáum hvernig framvindur. Sorry, Per, about the picture. Þetta mynd frá Svíþjóð þeir nota til þess að lýsa hvað raunfærnimat og mér hefur alltaf fundist hún rosalega skemmtileg. Hún í rauninni færni eða þekking úr fókus, en eftir raunfærnimat þá voru hún komin í fókus og sjáanleg. Og það megin tilgangurinn með raunfærnimat og ég held að mig aldrei gleyma því. Og við höfum alveg fengið spurningar í upphafi sérstaklega raunfærnimat, ekkert ekki afsláttarleið, við ekki að fara eitthvað gjaldfella þetta og hitt, en fyrir okkur hefur raunfærnimat aldrei verið afsláttur. Það bara svo einfalt. Og við höfum verið mjög dugleg að koma því til skila. En það var ein af þessum stóru spurningum sem var í upphafi. Það kom sérstaklega kannski frá skólakerfinu og síðan líka úr atvinnulífinu að hluta. Eins og ég sagði í upphafi, okkar markhópur þau sem hafa ekki lokið framhaldsskólanámi, þau sem hættu einhvern tímann í skóla og kusu að fara út á vinnumarkaðinn og ná sér í reynslu og þekkingu þar. Mjög mismunandi ástæður fyrir það hætti í skóla þegar maður spjallar við þau. En við höfum verið aðalega að meta raunfærni á móti námskrám framhaldsskólanna. Og það það bil 50 leiðir opnar. Þá ég að tala námsbrautir. Það eiginlega allar iðnnámsbrautirnar. Það mikið af brautum til dæmis í umönnunargreinum, skrifstofubrautir, hestabraut, þannig að úrvalið dálítið orðið mikið. Og það að þessi opnast þýðir það að það búið að búa til tæki til að raunfærnimeta, það búið að keyra kannski nokkra hópi gegn, mismunandi marga einstaklinga, en það ekki þannig sagt að þú geti labbað inn og sagt nú vil ég fá raunfærnimat í þessu. Það virkar ekki þannig, það safnað í hóp og farið á stað. Hins vegar höfum við líka verið að prófa að setja saman færniviðmið beint úr atvinnulífinu, þá í miklu samstarfi við atvinnulífið og raunfærnimeta beint á móti þeim viðmiðum. Þá færðu í rauninni engar einingar, þú færð bara staðfesting á því hvaða þekkingu út með og hvaða færni út með. Þetta eitthvað sem við höfum fyrst og fremst verið í tilraunaverkefnum með eins og ég sagði og allir við séum ekki búin að vera á sirka bát 4 sviðum núna. Það eru hljóðmenn, það eru bankafólk, þjónustufulltrúar, það fólk sem vinnur í vöruhúsum á lager og svo ég búin að gleyma restinni. En eins og ég segi, þetta svona tilraunaverkefni en ég reikna með því að í samstarfi við atvinnulífið núna á næstu 2 árum verði lögð mun meiri áhersla á að þróa þessa leið frekar. Nú, ef við reynum að skoða bara tímalínu í þessu, hvernig hún hefur verið, þá má segja að frá árunum 2002 eða 2004, Fjóla byrjaði nú að sampla dótið 2002-2003 og til 2006 þá þetta verið að leita út á við, leita líka inn í evrópsku viðmiðin og annað tvílíkt, í rauninni verið að reyna að þróa íslenska kerfið. Og það nú þannig að í öllum löndum sem við þekkjum til þá eitthvað sérstakt við öll kerfi. Það ekki bara að taka þó við eigum svona European Guidelines for Validation, þá ekki þetta bara að taka það og nákvæmlega setja það inn hjá okkur. En fyrir mér eru þessar leiðbeiningar, þær eru í rauninni dálítið góður rammi og við höfum alltaf að passa okkur dálítið vel að spila innan þessa ramma og það hefur gefist okkur vel. Síðan fer að koma bein fjármögnun á verkefni 2007. Lög og framhaldsfræðslu koma 2010 og reglugerðin 2011. Hún mjög skýr og bara góð að mínu áliti og hún var í rauninni bara þróuð, eða ekki bara, hún var þróuð út frá þeim tilraunum sem var búið að setja. Og fyrir mér það til fyrirmyndar að vinna þetta svona. Semast ekki byrja á að setja reglugerð að fara að vinna inn í það, heldur prófa fyrst og finna aðferðina. Það var mikil fjölgun á leiðum 2012-2015, þá fengum við svo kallaðan IPA-styrk sem dugði okkur hálfa leið, þá var hann allt í einu horfinn og það var dálítið erfitt, ég viðurkenni það allt í einu alveg í miðju kafi, þá vorum við alveg á útopnu að fjölga leiðum en þá var hann allt í einu bara farinn. Og síðan erum við núna, eins og ég sagði áðan, komin í dálítið stífar viðræður, ekki við, kannski beint við erum aðilar viðræðunum með atvinnulífi að ræða saman mun meira raunfærnimat beint á móti störfum. Þannig við erum kannski, ef við dreg saman það sem við erum fyrst og fremst að horfa á, það eru gæði í framkvæmd, það aðferðafræðin sem farið eftir, niðurstöður, halda utan tölulega staðreyndir og annað þvíumlíkt og síðan á réttindi einstaklingsins. Og ef maður horfir á Evrópureglugerðina, þá hún mikið til byggð á réttindum einstaklingsins. Hvernig á að fara með upplýsingar, hvað réttur hann til að gera athugasemdir og svo framvegis. Nú þetta lífið snýst um peninga, það ekki flókið. Og þarna koma lög og reglugerðir frá annars vegar Alþingi og ráðuneytinu. Peningarnir koma síðan inn í þetta kerfi frá menntamálaráðuneytinu. Innan eða við hliðina á fræðslumiðstöð atvinnulífsins rekinn fræðslusjóður. Það batterí sér fjármögnun á þessum verkefnum. Framkvæmdin hjá símenntunarmiðstöðum og fræðslumiðstöðum landið. Okkar samstarf eru 14 ef ég man rétt. Þannig á flestum stöðum framkvæmd raunfærnimat í mismiklu mæli. Sumt á landsvísu, annað svona meira á svæðisvísu. Og þá sem framkvæmdaraðili hverju sinni, hann verður að mynda stýrihóp fyrir það verkefni sem að fara af stað með. Þar koma ef það námskrá í formulega skólakerfinu, þá það atvinnulífið, skóli og ráðgjafarnir sem mynda stýrihópinn að lágmarki. Það síðan kallað saman í hóp, til dæmis að trésmiðum eða matvælatæknum eða skrifstofufólki eða fólki sem hefur unnið við þetta og þau rúlla í gegnum ferli saman en eða sjálfsögur eru þau metin sem einstaklingar. Síðan framkvæmdaraðilinn ábyrgur þá að skila til okkar tölfræði og upplýsingum hvernig gekk og allt þetta og við erum nýlega komin með það hlutverk og erum í samstarfi við Tækniskólann að setja einingar inn í Innu. Þannig að þannig lokum við ferlinu og einingarnir eru komnar í rauninni í hús. Þetta system hefur að mestu leyti gengið vel. Auðvitað það er ekkert heilagt í þessu, en samt ég held að það sem erfiðast hefur verið, sérstaklega kannski hvort að landsbyggðinni því að það er erfitt að nálga svona mikið af fólki í einu til að keyra í gegn. Það er líka, það komur að segja að þú þarft ákveðin stöðugleika í framkvæmd til að ná gæðum í raunfærnumati. Það er mjög erfitt að ætla að gera það einu sinni og koma svo aftur að því eftir 2 ár. Þannig að það er svona ákveðin atriði sem þarf alveg að horfa til. Nú, já, ég ætla að tekna peningana hérna, það var nauðsynlegt. Aðeins ef við tölum bara tölur, þá sjáum við þarna að þau sem hafa lokið raunfærnumati frá árinu 2007 eru tæplega 3200 og þau hafa fengið metnar rúmlega 90.000 einingar. Og svo kemur þessi athyglisverða tala í endan neðst niður á töflunni, meðalaldur þeirra skríður yfir 40 ár. Þetta ekki kjúklingar, þau hafa mjög mikla reynslu. Yfirleitt erum við að tala fólk með 7 til 20 ára reynslu á vinnumarkaði og þau vita ansi mikið. Og þau sem, já, þeir matsaðalar sem ég tala stundum við, þeir segja eitt af því sem verður að vera alveg klárað og stundum veit einstaklingurinn sem situr á móti mér og við erum að tala saman einhverja þekkingu, hann veit meira en ég. Og það bara þannig. Og það var stundum erfitt að sætta sig við það, sagði einhver fyrst. En, ok, það bara þannig. Ef við leikum okkur aðeins meira tölum, þá ef ég breyti þessu í skólaár, þá þetta 2570 skólaár miðað við það að klára 20 einingar og annað. Þannig að þetta það sem þau hafa stytt sér leið í formlega skólakerfinu, þau sem hafa farið þá leið. Starfsmennta iðngreiðarnar voru mjög áberandi fyrst, það skýrir kannski að vissu leyti kynjahallan á þessari töflu, en starfsmenntabrautirnar hafa verið að koma mjög sterkar inn á seinni árum. Það var einfaldlega þannig að við byrjuðum með raunfærnumat tengt iðngreinum, þar var atvinnulífið tilbúið og viljugt og það var líka mikilvægt fyrir okkur að byrja einhvers staðar afmarkað, ekki byrja á að reyna að keyra kerfið yfir allt, heldur byrja dálítið afmarkað og reyna á færni þar. Þannig að við eigum töluvert af dúxum, Hildur Elín nú í þessu salnum. Ég minnir að ég hafi séð töluna að það væri til 10 dúxar allavega í iðngreinum sem hefðu dúxað á sveinsprófi og kannski megin breytingi fyrir mér dálítið að skólakerfið eðlilega upphafi tók dálítið með varkárni á móti þessum nemendum en þau eru orðin mjög eftirsóttir nemendur í dag og skólarnir segja einfaldlega það sem ég heyri, þau breyta móralum, þau hafa áhrif á svona menninguna, þau komu beint af vinnumarkanum, þau eru til þess að klára þetta og þeim þykir orðið mjög mikilvægt að fá þessa reynslu af vinnumarkaðinu beint inn í skóluna. Ég reyndi að taka styrkleikan í þessu kerfi sem hefur verið þróað og ég held að ekkert svona kerfi sé þróað án stuðnings atvinnulífsins. Og margir hefðu nú örugglega reiknað með ég myndi setja skólakerfið næst en ég setja atvinnulífið fremst. Það hefur alveg verið ómetanlegt að þau hafi verið tilbúin í þetta. Við eigum ennþá svæði innan atvinnulífsins sem segja við viljum ekki raunfærnumat hjá okkur, hjá minni starfsstétt. Og við erum alltaf að hringja í öðru hvoru og spyrja hvort þessi ekki búið að skipta skoðun. Sumir hafa gert það en stundum taka svona viðræður bara varðandi að byrja einhvers staðar, þær taka mjög langan tíma. Og ég veit það að við höfum stundum setið upp undir svona ekki náttúrulega í beinum viðræðum dag eftir dag en það hefur kannski ferlið tekið einhverju 2 ár áður en það fyrstu verkefni fór á stað. Evrópuleiðbeiningarnir eins og ég sagði áðan hafa verið mjög mikilvæga fyrir okkur að hafa þennan ramma bak við okkur. Miðlæg samræmd aðferðafræði, gagnasöfnum og fjármagn. Já, þetta er ég að hrósa fyrst og fremst fræðslumiðstöð atvinnulífsins og ráðuneytinu fyrir að fali þessa leið að hafa þetta miðlægt. Það alveg að gera þetta öðruvísi. En það sem náttúrulega fyrst og fremst gerur okkur þetta kleift að við erum svo lítið land. Þetta svo fáir einstaklingar, en við sjáum alveg dæmi frá öðrum löndum sem við lítum á sem við erum að passa okkur á. Þar kannski þetta fylki með raunfærnimat sem svona, og svo næsta fylki með raunfærnimat sem allt öðruvísi, svo allar einstaklingurinn að fara á milli, þá eru niðurstöðnar ekki gildar. Þannig að fyrir okkur mjög einföld svona staðreind sem við komumst að núna í Nordplus-verkefni. Við vorum svona að reyna að nálgast norræna áhersluna og það var svona einfalda leiðin. Við settum alltaf bara einstaklingin í miðjuna. Allt á að snúast einstaklingin. Ekki núverandi eða kerfi sem eða bla 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 bla. Einstaklingurinn alltaf númer 1. Viðurkenning á lögum og reglugerð. Með lögum og reglugerð. Ég búinn að fjalla það. Hún skýr, stutt og hún liggur hérna frammi. Það alveg þess virði að rúlla yfir hana. Hún ein síða það sem stýra raunfærnimatinu. Og síðan það sem hefur þótt takast vel hjá okkur á Íslandi að ráðgjöfin inn í raunfærnimatinu mjög sterk. Sem bæði í upphafi að skima hverjir eiga erindi í raunfærnimat. Það engum greiðu gerði með því að fara í raunfærnimat sem hefur ekki neitt til að meta og líka síðan það sem kemur á eftir. Sem sagt að leiðbeina innan hvað getur svo gert við niðurstöðurnar. Niðurstöðurnar fullt gildi samkvæmt lögum og reglugerð. Framkvæmdin nokkuð nálægt markhópunum og það hefur reynst vel að láta til dæmis símenntunarmiðstöðvar, fræðslumiðstöðvar og aðra sem í fullorðinsfræðslu ná út af vinnumarkaðinn til þess einstaklingar sem eiga erindi. Og svo náttúrulega ekki verra eða út á Akureyri þessi aðili þar sem að keyra verkefnið. Erlenda samstarfi og þessi til dæmis norræna kreðsa sem við eða norræna hópa sem við sitjum í og tölum reglulega að þetta eiginlega símenntunin okkar í raunfærnimati. Og hún okkur afskaplega mikið virði. Þar erum við að sjá mistökin sem aðrir gera, læra þeim vonandi og líka við erum að segja öðrum hvað við höfum gert sem ekki hefur virkað vel, en svo ekki síður það sem hefur virkað vel. Við erum með afmarkaða markhóp, þau sem ekki hafa lokið framhaldsskólanámi. Það auðvelda okkur allavega í upphafi. Ég ekki viss að það sé endilega gott lengur. Það sem sagt á næstu glæri kemur veikleikarnir og þar það líka tekið fram ef maður rétt. Þannig að, og í reglugerðinni þá alveg skilgreindir framkvæmdaaðilar. Svo má alveg spyrja sig að því eiga allir sem uppfylla einhver ákveðna gæðakröfur að geta framkvæmt raunfærnimat. En þegar þú ert með svona lítinn pening þá spurningin hvort þú að dreifa honum allt og víðar. Það bara svona alltaf einhver spurningamerki. Nú kannski það sem, já, nú ég að spýta upp, við á 4 mínútur heitt. Styrkleikarnir, stuðningur atvinnulífsins eins og ég talaði áðan, Evrópuleiðbeiningar þar. Nei, ég komin í veikleikana núna, ég ætlaði að fyrirgefa því, nú ég að byrja aftur. Leiðir til að ljúka námi hafa verið stundum dálítið erfiðar, sérstaklega þegar það varst út á landi. Stöðuleiki framkvæmd, það það sem við töluðum aðeins áðan. Það sem hefur stundum vafist fyrir okkar matsaðalar að finna þetta hvað sambarilegt og jafngilt. Þarf ég að vita hvað maðurinn sem setti fram kenninguna heitir eða þarf ég bara að vita hvað kenningin gengur út á. Eða þið skiljið hvað ég meina. Þetta stundum svona dálítið erfitt. Við erum með mjög fáar námsbrautir á þrepi 2. Þær eru varla til, já, jú, þær eru til, en þær eru ekki margar. Ekkert miðað við fjölda námsbraut á þrepi 3. Og við erum með mjög fáar námsbrautir á þrepi 4. Þannig að það þetta milliháskólastig sem mikið talað um. Stundum kemur upp þessi vantrú að sé hægt að læra utan formlega skólakerfisins. Hún kemur kannski fyrst og fremst innan frá skólakerfisins. skólakerfinu. En hún nú að minnka allavega í þeim skólum sem að taka við nemendum út úr þessu og koma nálægt raunfærnimati. Og svo þessi afmörku markhópar eins og ég sagði, ég setti þessi styrkleika á þann en það getur líka verið veikleiki. Ef ég aðeins fer út í framtíðina, þetta kort, og ég ætlast ekki til þess að lesi það, en þetta kortlagning á ferðaþjónustu. Þarna skilt upp í aðalkategóriur, ferðir og afþreying, flugstarfsemi, fólksflutningar, gisting, veitingar og svo koma undirflokkar og í undirflokkunum haugur af störfum. Þau á svona við fyrstu sín á þess að greina það nákvæmlega á þrepunum frá 2, 1, það svona til en upp í 6. Þau ná semast allan hringinn eða semast upp allan skallan nema við sáum ekki doktorsprófið eiginlega. Þannig að, og þetta bara mat stjórnenda í ferðaþjónustunni. Og ferðaþjónustan hefur mikinn, atvinnurekendur þar og verkalýðshreyfingin hafa mikinn áhuga á því að koma á raunfærnimati fyrir þessi störf. Þetta hrikalega stórt verkefni en ógeðslega skemmtilegt. Og þar við farin að tala raunverulegum þrepaskiptingu á námi, þrepa hæfnirammi fyrir mér snýst bara fyrst og fremst hæfni eða ábyrgð og sjálfstæði í starfi. En það svona ýmsar skoðanir á því. En þetta það sem við erum að pæla núna sem mest, sem næstu skref í raunfærnimati og þarna örugglega nokkur störf sem myndi flokkast á háskólastig. Tækifærin í nútíðinni, það hæfniramminn. Hvernig verður hann útfærður og nýttur? Verður hann lokaður og skólamiðaður eða verður hann opinn og atvinnulífstengdur? Það bara ekki allir sammála það, hvora leiðin á að fara. Og það svo sem búið að vera að tala það í, 2 ára eitthvað. En við hljótum að fara að komast að niðurstöðu. En hann allan að atvinnulífið lítur á hann sem ekki tækifæri til að tengja saman skóla og atvinnulíf. Upplýsingagjöf og sýnilega leiðir til starfsþróunar. Ef ég vinn á móttökunni á Hótel Selfossi, hvernig get ég orðið hótelstjóri á Hilton? Það á að vera mér alveg sýnilegt. Það ekki í dag. Greininga við atvinnulífs segi ég að sé, og ég held að atvinnulífs sé dálítið mikið að taka við sér í því að það bara dálítið mikilvægt að atvinnulífi segi hvað það þarf. Það mikið talað samtal atvinnulífs og skóla og það fara aldrei á stað og allt það. Og svo kannski eitt af stóru dæmurna líka, við reiknum með nokkur 1000 manns á ári að vinna í ferðaþjónustunni til dæmis sem kemur erlendis frá. Hvernig ætlum við að mæta því? Þannig að við sjáum tækifæri sem snúa uppbygging á þekkingarlínum, raunfærnimat á móti viðmiðum atvinnulífsins og kannski raunfærnimat á 4., 5. og 6. þrepi, auk þess náttúrulega 2, 3, 4. Þannig að þetta svona örstutt yfirlit. Við hérna með, það hérna svona bæklingar frammi og einna svona smá kynning á þessu hérna. Þetta semst roadmap til 2018 eins og kom fram hérna áðan að þá eiga 2018 löndin að vera komið með kerfi í funksjón og þetta eins konar gátlisti hvernig lönd eða einstakir bransar eða stig og skólastig geta mælt sig gagnvart stöðu þeirra í dag. En hérna, nú ég búinn á tímanum. Hérna, gaman að fá að tala við ykkur og vona að þið verðið síðu öllu nær. Takk.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our next speaker. This is Kirsten Aagaard. She's from Denmark. She works at VIA University College, where she leads the National Knowledge Center for Validation and also the Center for Lifelong Learning. So she's going to tell us a bit about what's happening in Denmark. Please.
Thank you for inviting me to this seminar. Validation has been the core issue in my working life in the last 10 years. So I'm very dedicated to validation. And I will just, as a short comment, say that I think if validation is going to be a main possibility in our countries, it's very important that the higher education area will be included in the validation activities. And we know that it's not so easy to convince universities to work with validation. So I'm happy to be here and take part, and I will say something about the Danish system as such and the policy, because I think that when you are just starting up with validation, I think that will be of interest for you. And some about the state of the art in Denmark about validation in higher education. First of all, I will just say something about the Danish educational system. In Denmark, we have a kind of a parallel system over here. And in a way, it's a first step in Denmark to open up for validation. Because, for example, you can go to the master level over here if you have been working 2 years. You can also go into the diploma level if you have been working 2 years, and so on. Also at the VVU, it's the academy level. So there you have the first way to recognize the experiences that people have from working life. But what I just want to say is that yeah, it's a little difficult because it's so huge. But you have the possibility to work in higher education with validation in the VVU and in the diploma programs, and then you have it in the mainline education system over there at the academy and the professional bachelor degrees. I will explain a little more about it. But still, we cannot work with validation at the university level as such. But it will come. In Denmark, there's been a policy about validation since 1995. And it's about to support a higher level of competences. As such, there have been a special interest in low and unskilled levels, but also at the higher levels as such. Also to make learning visible and to improve cross-sectorial mobility and to improve labor market mobility. And now we are at the agenda at lifelong learning. And I think that validation is a very concrete thing when we are working with lifelong learning. It's also a question about getting certificates for more than formal education, but still in the formal system. And here I think that the educational system has a feeling of being challenged because somebody thinks we are losing something now. We are losing power and so on. And maybe you could have the same feeling. And I think you should move it away. Because it's not the case. The case is that it's a question about how to recognize the competences people have from non-formal, informal, and formal learning as such. The policy process is also about economic, and it's, for example, about you should not have the same education as you already has. So that's also something about this. So it's also about shortening the length of formal education. So here we can see the economical agenda. Then I just want to show this one. It's a model that was used first time in 2004. It was 4 different ministries in Denmark that made a policy paper for the government, and here they use this model, and in a way it's very simple, but if we can make the connection between educational system, working life, and liberal adult education, everything learned in third sector, and you could say in life as such. A lot of young people, they are learning a lot of things themselves without participating in anything. The question is how to move across the lines, the borders, how to accept, how to give credits and so on for competences learned in working life and do that in the educational system. Here we have 2 regimes, I think. We have a regime in the educational system still, and this is the curriculum regime. You have to learn what we want you to learn and what we want you to be taught in. And then we have another regime in working life. It's about what competences do we need in our enterprises, for example, and so on. And to connect those 2 regimes, it's very important. And if you can manage here in Iceland to connect those, to transform competences from one area to another, it's both ways, then I think you will be very, very well known in the whole world. But it's what we really have to work on to do this. Okay, this was a kind of a little pep talk here in the middle of the afternoon, I think. Okay, we have 2 different possibilities in the legislation of validation in Denmark in higher education. The one is, as I said, in the adult and continuing further education system at the academy level and at the diploma level. And now I know it's something special Danish, I think, but some of you have also this, I think. Here you can get access to education, you can get exemption, and you can get a certification. I took part in December in an assessment of a person that want a whole diploma degree in leadership. And he had made papers, he had made some arguments and so on. He had really been doing a lot of reflections of his competences, and he got it. It's not normal in Denmark that we the educational system they give a certification, a certification at the diploma level, and I think it's also because a lot of institutions they are not, and this is university colleges that have this possibility to do this, and maybe it's because they are not sure how to do it. And maybe you're also unsure if the quality is there and so on, because of course you are not going to have another level of expectations of what you need to know and what competences you need to have. But it's a possibility. Then we also have in the mainline educational system, you have the possibility, if you have not upper secondary education, you can have an assessment and get access to the bachelor degrees in the university colleges. And that's also a huge possibility, and it's used a lot. I will say something more about that a little bit later. But that's the possibilities we have in higher education in Denmark. And what's this all about then? We have some principles behind, and I don't understand Icelandic, but I think I understood something what Højgaard said about the individual in the center, and that it's the individual that, so to say, earn the paper you get out of an assessment. And this is also about this. Then the legislation in Denmark is very much about assessment. It's about how the educational institutions can work with assessment, and it's also them that get the money, you could say, for doing this. So in a way, it's also important to mention that we have a legislation, and it's in a way a framework legislation. And then the institutions, they have to find out how to do it. So we have not national tools or whatever, but in the legislation you also have written something about how do the institutions need to work to qualify their way to work with validation. So in a way we both have a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach where you could say it's in high degrees decentralized. It's both very good, I think, and in another way it's also problematic because all the institutions, they need to build up the way they work with validation themselves. Of course, there's a lot of networking and things like that to be sure to do the work together in the right way, and to do it so it can be trustable. Then shortly about the financial structures. You get a taximeter from the ministries when you are working with assessment of validation. You are not getting anything if you are doing guidance and things like that. So that's not so easy. And in the higher education, for example, at the diploma program level, you can the institutions, they can charge a fee for the validation process. So it is. Then shortly something about the challenges. As I said in the beginning, I think we in a way have two different regimes about competences and learning activities. So, and how to mediate between legal currency and individual pathways. That's not easy because the currency you use in the educational system, you have concepts, you have terms and a way to talk about this, and you have the criteria from the learning outcomes. All the educations in Denmark are described in learning outcomes, so that should make it easier to work with validation when it's so, but not always. And how can you talk about the experiences that somebody has from working life and practicing? Is it anything worse when you are going to try to get access to, for example, the teacher education? it's really a hard thing to find out, and it's really needed to work with this. Yeah. Just shortly, those barriers, it's called in English, I think. You can have a look at them, and I think you will recognize them. And the most important thing, I think, is to work with competence development, because this area about validation is something else for a lot of teachers and guiders when you are working in the educational system. Then you have to change your mind in many ways to open your eyes for competences learned in non-formal and informal settings. Then this has been at the agenda in Denmark, also in higher education in several years, and still we would say that we could have improvement at this area. So the ministries have also thought about this, and there's a lot of different support structures. There have been a lot of extensive information. We have a website, the UG website. There have been several campaigns, but it's not the best way to use the money, we have found out. And then there's really a need of coordination, because the work with validation includes different stakeholders, and it's very important to open up for that. Then and this could be for inspiration for you, the ministry decided to have a knowledge platform addressing higher education sector in Denmark, and my center have made it, and just here's some of the content. It's policy, legislation, and so on. It's about how to organize this, how the description of procedures, tools, and way to work with it, and then it's about guidance as well. I'm not sure I can link to it, but I will just try. If you can read Danish. Oops, it's only here at the front. Okay, I'm going back. How do I come back? Okay. That's a platform, and it used of a lot of people, so that's good. And then we also have a research project focusing on validation in the bachelor educations. We have 3 PhD studies and 5 development projects, and we are next week, the publication about this is finished, and I can send it if any of you can read Danish. It could be of interest, I think. For example, it's about validation, access to the teacher education, how do they work with guidance, and how do they work with dialogue with a candidate, and so on. So, and the result is that VPL is a motivation factor for the people that want to go into higher education without upper secondary education. They are very dedicated to learning, they are very dedicated to the education, and in some institutions they really like to have those students with a VPL process behind them, because they are very focused in their study activities. The question is that are the university colleges ready to receive those students, to give them place with the experiences they have? That's also a question. But it's a very interesting study we are doing there, and it's very productive for the improvement of the use of validation. Okay. Then I could just say something about how many. We have not in Denmark very good statistics. It is an issue for the ministries, but they are not so concerned about it. But for example, I know in my institution, in the diploma program for leadership, they have this year made 100 assessments for access to the diploma program there. And in the pedagogical education at bachelor degree, 10% they are coming in to a validation process. So that's okay. So it differs quite a lot from one education to another, how much they are open up for validation, but they are doing it more and more. For example, the bachelor education for nurses, they are more interested now than they were 5 years ago. So we have changes here. Yes, okay. That was my speech.
Okay, we see 10% of your pedagogical students come in into university through prior validation of prior learning. That's quite interesting. Thank you very much, Kirsten. And it's coffee time. So I hope you managed to fill up and meet your coffee needs. I studied in Germany, and then you talk about the Kaffeespiegel. How you have to have enough coffee to be able to survive the day. So we, the water level, the coffee level in our body, we managed to recuperate now, I hope. Okay, beside me is a colleague from Finland, Anni Karttunen, and she's going to tell us about what they're doing in Finland. And I've managed to find out that she's an expert on the validation of prior learning, and she is kind of a spokesperson. She's traveling all around the world, Egypt and the Eastern Europe, telling them all about the nice things you can learn about recognition of prior learning. But maybe if there's anything else we need to know about you, you will please tell us. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Right. So thank you for this interesting introduction. I didn't know that rumors go around. So my name is Anni Karttunen, and I'm currently working at CIMO, which is the Center for International Mobility in Finland. It's an independent agency under the auspices of the Ministry of Culture and Education. And I'm a program manager there for adult education, which means that I'm operating with higher education, with vocational education, school education, and of course non-formal liberal adult education. Wherever there is adult education, I'm there. So, and obviously, in the adult education programs, validation is a very big policy issue and a focal point. I haven't been working there as a program manager for a long time, but I've spent all my adult life working with validation in one way or another. I've started in 1997. Don't ask me how old I am. But yeah, I started in 1997 as an assessor in a vocational college for adults. I didn't know anything about validation then, but I was asked to actually assess people's competencies, which is a very interesting combination. But then later on, I went to higher education institutions, to a higher education institution to get formal qualifications to become a formally accredited assessor in validation. Finland is one of those rare countries where we have a compulsory training for assessors who are working in the validation system in vocational education and training. And it's a relatively extensive course. And by the time that, when I started seeking out for this formal qualification, that was, I think, in 2006. And by that time, I had already been working on a European level, a Nordic level, with validation issues for quite a few years, like maybe 4 years. And I was sort of the ambassador for the Finnish validation system at the time. So I knew quite a lot about what was going on with regards of legislation, policies, and of course practice, because I had been practicing it myself. So as I entered the formal course in the higher education institution, the first day I said, okay, you are teaching about validation, about how the assessor should, what kind of competencies assessors should have, how does the system work. And I said, I know that the legislation actually allows you to validate me as well. So I've got quite a lot of competencies on very different levels. So how about you validate me and give me my certificate through validation? Oh my God, what a shock. They were really, really scared. And I said, well, how can you talk about validation? How can you teach validation if you don't do it yourself? And they did. Then I was able to persuade them actually to start validating my competencies. And I said, okay, I will teach you how. And this is exactly what happened. I was teaching the teacher groups who were teaching the assessment of validation. I gave them lectures. I prepared them lectures on how validation works, for example, on a European level, and these different issues, what's happening on the Nordic network. I was giving a series of lectures, and of course then I had a lot of written articles and different kinds of projects where I've been involved in on a European and Nordic level. So I just made a compilation of all that as like a portfolio type of thing, and they were just like, yeah, that was great, thank you, here is your certificate. So this was really the beginning of validation in higher education in Finland. But yeah, interestingly enough, Yerevan was mentioned a couple of times here in the earlier presentations, and I'm happy to say that I will be traveling to Yerevan in the midsummer week. So I won't be celebrating midsummer, but I will be in Yerevan talking about validation in higher education. There is a twinning project on this topic, the higher education area. And even though it wasn't part of the project plan as such, but probably because of all these conferences and stuff that discussed validation, then they decided that before the project ends, they want to have a little peek to the world of validation in Armenia as well. So I'm really happy about that. Good, but to go to the business. All right. So a little bit about the legislative basis of the Finnish higher education system, I didn't actually know how much time I would have today, so I kept it really, really short. But I thought that if there is more time, then I can fill out the gaps by just talking. So I only took sort of the basis of the Universities Act. There's, of course, the higher education is much more than just universities. There's the Universities of Applied Sciences as well, which forms a magnificent network. And they have a very similar legislative basis as universities do. Here I just I copied what it says there. It says that in degree studies, the student may count studies completed in a Finnish or foreign university or some other educational institution towards the degree and replace studies included in the degree with other studies. So this is from formal to formal, right? Nothing new about that. We've all probably been there if we've been an exchange student or something like that, or changed institutions. But then, the interesting part, at the discretion of the universities, the student may also count towards the degree and replace studies included in the degree with knowledge demonstrated in some other manner. So it's relatively freely expressed. What this also implies that, of course, universities have an autonomy, so they can decide whether they're going to start applying validation or not. So therefore, I can't say that it's something that exists in every single higher education institution in Finland, but at the moment I can say that majority of the universities and universities of applied sciences, they have a practice, and they, you know, some have a better practice than others. But anyways, the legislation has existed for far more than a decade in one form or another. And in the beginning, it was really interpreted more that it is more like validation from formal to formal, not so much from non-formal or informal to formal. And a typical case was, for example, an exchange period abroad in another university. And even that had lots of problems. It wasn't unproblematic at all. Because, first of all, there was lack of learning outcomes, so they were not necessarily comparable, what was being studied. The plans prior to going to a foreign university, they weren't very clear, so students did whatever they did, and then the university staff back at home, they did whatever they wanted to do. So there was no rules or regulations to that in the olden days, but it's getting better all the time. And I remember in 2005, I did a big round in the Finnish higher education institutions, mainly in universities, asking them, how do you feel about validation? Could you consider it a good practice? And is it carried out in your higher education institution? And I would say that 90% of all the people that I spoke to in different universities, the answer was practically that over our dead bodies. Very positive. So they didn't so much, I don't know if it was they didn't dare say that they're scared of losing their autonomy or their power or whatever the reasons was. They mainly said that it's so time-consuming and expensive process. That was the main reason that they gave. However, now we are in a completely different situation, because in 2009 and 2010 there were two big European Social Fund projects that started in Finland, and they concerned only the higher education sector. And the aim of those projects was to actually develop and implement validation procedures. And there was another one. The first one was called AHOT. It's Accreditation of Prior Experiential Learning. That was simply the name of the project. And it was run by the University of Turku between 2009 and 2014. And I was happy to be one of the trainers there in that project. So I was, running around the country and trying to persuade teachers and guidance counselors in universities to start taking on validation and, make them understand what it was and what the benefits were. And then there was this other one that only concerned the Eastern Finland, the part of Eastern Finland. It was called Recognition of Experience Gained in Working Life, and that was between 2010 and 12. And I was part of the steering group of that project, which was really interesting to be able to go and see the actual processes that they were developing. And altogether in these two projects, the projects were of course interlinked. There were 14 higher education institutions involved. So, Finland is a small country, so practically it was like relatively almost all of the higher education institutions, with one big exception, which is the University of Helsinki, because they think that they are too old and too proud to be able to participate in an activity like this. They have their own sort of method of working, but it was criticized quite a bit that they didn't want to be involved in this. So what were the results of these two massive projects? First of all, they came up with recommendations on recognition of prior learning in the fields of business, technology, communications and languages, health, natural sciences, and social studies. So practically covering, most of the sectors taught in the higher education. And the recommendations were really sort of very practical, like how does it work, what is allowed and what is not allowed in the sectors. And it was also a lot about networking. One of the main reasons why these recommendations were made is also that you get the different higher education sectors to talk to one another. Like, what are our challenges? What's, how do you do it? How are you planning to do it, etc., because that is of crucial importance, the networking business. And then one of the big results was, of course, that hundreds of higher education staff, teachers and counselors mainly, they were trained to understand what validation was, because it wasn't really clear to all of them. I remember in one training session, there was this language teacher from higher education institution. She came to me and she said, yes, I completely agree with what you're saying, but can you believe that there was this student who was a German student, a German person who was studying in Finland, and he had the nerve to ask me that could I recognize his German skills as a second language? What the hell is that? He hasn't done anything for it. He was just born for German parents, and I was like, yeah. This is exactly what I was talking about the whole day. But it's not so easy. Yeah. So, and then there were a lot of different kinds of validation procedures that were developed and also implemented during these projects. And I was really impressed by the implementation part, because usually it's like you have development project after development project, but there's no implementation. But they really started doing it right away. And I was really impressed. And here I have to say that one of the most important features was that, especially the University of Eastern Finland, they decided that whenever they register the credits that are gained through validation, that in the student register it doesn't stand out. So if they print out the student register, like this, what are they called? Credit transfer scripts. That it looks exactly the same as if it was a normal course, even though it had been gained through validation. And this has been a very crucial part, first of all, because of financing. Because in some universities it's been a problem because they have just like marked it as like with validation, so it doesn't necessarily give you normal credits towards getting benefits from the state, because they haven't really sat at school and worked for that, or that's the, you know, illusion. So now all the students could actually get the benefits because when they gave the transcript of study records, it looked exactly the same, and they would get their benefits normally. And also too, when you are looking for a job or whatever, so then there is no, you know, discussion that, well, yeah, but this is gained through validation, so it's not worth nothing, you know. So it sort of prevents a lot of problems. And then one thing also that was really important, I also already mentioned the networks, but then during these projects, regional validation networks were established, and they're still active, and they're still exchanging information because it's an ongoing process that they're developing their systems. And then, of course, they started working on their learning outcome-based curricula, and that takes a lot of time. And a lot of cooperation between different actors. And then I just listed a couple of benefits. Why did the universities and other higher education institutions, why did they start developing validation? First of all, there is no extra financing for that in Finland. So, for example, the government doesn't pay any extra for validation. So actually the universities say that they're doing it all on their own expense, but they see it as such a benefit, as an, you know, in a competitive situation, they can use it as a marketing tool to, you know, to get in good students with a lot of experience. So they get in more, even though they spend a lot of money on validation in a way, to create the validation activities and all the guidance systems, etc., but in return, they get more students applying for the universities, and the sort of the process is just a little bit quicker. So at the end of the day, they end up getting more money. And of course, they see that is an integral part of the lifelong learning commitment of higher education institutions. That's first and foremost. And they have been quite happy that they have been able to create these individual study paths for their students. So it becomes much more effective. And, you know, Kirsten was talking about the double learning effect, for example. So this can be really avoided by creating these individual study paths. And of course, it's much more efficient system when, you know, people just do, you know, they study what they need to study and don't just sit around, hanging around at the uni. And one of the major issues has been, and it was sort of like realized at a later stage, that actually this process improves the cooperation with working life, and that universities had been talking about that for years in Finland, that we should do it, we should work more with working life, we should do this and that, but nothing really happened. It was more like, okay, there was cooperation on a research level if they were getting money from businesses to do research for them, but there was no like deep cooperation. So this really opened up doors for universities to promote that. What's happening now after the projects have finished? The higher education institutions, all of them that were involved, they have adopted validation procedures. It's an integral part of their activities. I've seen their leaflets. I have been doing like external audits on these higher education institutions. I've seen their documents, they're really doing it. They're not just pretending to be doing it, but they're really doing it, and they're promoting their activities to the students. And I would have to say that in these institutions, validation has rather become now, it's a norm rather than an exception. And that makes me really happy. And now the Finnish government is really promoting validation a lot because of the refugee crisis. I had to bring that in because now they realize that, okay, we need to have a coordinated system how to promote validation and guidance so that we can get all these 30,000 refugees that just came in just like that, so that we can actually get them to working life really quickly. So this is what's the status quo at the moment. And I have a collection of, will you have this on a website or? There's one in the folders. Yeah, there's only one, yeah, but there's like a process, there are different kinds of very practical process descriptions, etc., that they're in English. So you can actually have a look at them if you get these presentations. Yeah, okay, good. And this is what I want you to leave with. You all get a card, a Monopoly card, a chance card, which says that it may be kept until needed or sold to get out of the qualifications jail for free. Thank you so much.
We have Camilla Alfsen, who works at Vox, which is a central organization for adult learning in Norway, and she works on the validation of prior learning and career guidance there. She's going to tell us a bit about the situation in Norway. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can use this.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's very interesting to be participating in this kind of seminars, because validation in higher education is quite interesting, I think, and we have a lot to do when it comes to that theme. I have to say a few words about Vox, just a few words. My name is Camilla Alfsen, and I work at Vox, which is the National Agency for Lifelong Learning in Norway, in Oslo. And we have an English website, so if you are interested in some of the other themes we work with, so just go to our website. We work with basic skills for adults, immigrant integration, and such things. And I've been working with validation since 2003 in different areas. We have been working with validation in Norway since 1999, and the legislation came in 2000 and 2001. And even in higher education, we have had validation stated in the laws. But even though we have still a lot of challenges, as I will talk more about. We have, validation in Norway is concentrated on the formal education. And in all the formal education acts, we have mentioned validation as a possibility. So in the Education Act, Opplæringsloven in Norwegian, which is up till upper secondary education, they have implemented validation systems. In the Vocational College Act, they have implemented validation since 2003. I think it's the sector which is less using validation, if I could say it like that. And then we have the University and University College Act, which has had validation in the laws since 2001. Just to say some things about the Norwegian education system. This is a very simple picture, and in contrast to Kirsten's picture, you can see that all the formal education system in Norway is one system, both for adults and for children. And when it comes to validation, the first two boxes, which is primary and lower secondary education and upper secondary education, they have national curricula. So if you are going to be validated in these two areas, you have the same national curricula whenever you are in the country. And that makes it quite easy because it's the same learning outcomes you have to be measured towards. In the two top boxes there, the tertiary vocational education, vocational colleges, you might be validated, and also in the higher education system. But in these validation systems, it's up to each institution based on the autonomy. So the validation might be different in the different institutions, and even if it is the same subject, you might get different results based on the local programs and local learning outcomes. Yeah. This looks similar. Do you have some of the same education system in Iceland as well? I suppose you have. Yeah. I'm going to concentrate on higher education now, so I'm not going to say anything more about the other boxes. This is the general process of all validation processes. We start with information and guidance, which in the European papers are called identification. And then we have the mapping phase and documentation of competences. And then the assessment phase, which is the most interesting phase maybe, seen from the higher education system. And then the certification as the last phase. In our Norwegian university and university colleges law, we have stated that for applicants who are 25 years or older and have not the formal what's called General College and University Admission Certification, which you get after you have finished the upper secondary school, you are allowed to enter into higher education. If you have not finished your upper secondary school, you may seek admission based on validation. So if you have your formal qualification, you are not allowed to seek on basis of validation. And that has something to do with the economy, I think, because it is more complicated to validate than to just base on the formal qualification. The informal, non-formal qualification or competence that they use has to be adequate for the course. I'm going to give you an example. And as I said, the admittance procedures are decided locally. So if you seek to different colleges, universities, based on the same documentation, you may get different results. And that's just how it is, based on the autonomy. I will give you an example. This is Mary. She wants to be a nurse. She is 28 years old. She has 2 children, aged 4 and 1. Dropped school at 16, many part-time jobs. She has worked 6 years full-time as a healthcare assistant. And based on that, she wants to be a nurse. She has not completed her upper secondary education, so she is not allowed through the formal route. But she may seek based on her non-formal, informal qualifications. Nurse is in Norway a bachelor program, so it's in higher education. When she seeks this admission based on her prior learning, she has to document competence from at least 5 years of practice, which is relevant. And she has worked as a healthcare assistant for 6 years, so she has a lot of competence. She has to prove some kind of Norwegian and English competence, somehow. many of the institutions ask for motivation. So many of them ask for some kind of letter telling that I'm motivated, I want to do this, I have dreamt of being a nurse all my life, or something like that. And they may also have other specific requirements based on what kind of program it is. If she is accepted, she will enter as a normal student and go through the normal procedure as a normal student. We have had a few studies following these students, and the results are quite interesting because some of these students, they may have trouble the first year because they are not trained in academic writing. They may have some problems with mathematics, for instance, or something, because they have not been to school for some years. But if they manage the first year, which most of them do, they struggle a bit, but they do, they are very motivated, then they actually have a better study progress than the normal students, because they have the practice as well. They haven't just gone to school, they have worked in the field, they know what it's about, and now they are getting the academic on top of it. So they are nice, they are clever students, and when they are graduated, they actually, some of them go into leading jobs because they have the practice and they have the theory. In comparison with the normal students who have gone to school first for 13 years and then a university for 3 years. So compared to that, the Mary kind of student is quite well qualified when she is finished. I have some national statistics. Not very many students apply based on validation, but all the institutions are obliged to have systems for validation for admittance. So approximately 5% of the total student population seek have application based on prior learning. And as you can see, 44% of them are qualified. So they apply, they are assessed, and they get their result, even if they get a study place or not. And then 27 of them started their studies. So even though they are qualified, they may have sought more places, they may have changed their mind or something like that. So that's how it works in Norway. We have the Vox Statistics Banks. If you want more details, you may find something there. I don't know if you can see this, but this is just to show the different fields of study and the number of applicants. This is the number of applicants, and this is how many were admitted. And as you can see, many of the studies actually have validation students, and many of them are accepted. 2 of them are not accepting validating students, as this is shown. Medicine, some have applied based on prior learning to medicine, and no one have been accepted. And also in school teaching, actually, no one has been accepted. And that may be, I don't know why, but it may be because in some of the school teaching curriculum, to the admittance, they demand a certain grade from the upper secondary education. And if you are validated, you will not have the same type of grades as you will have when you go to school. So maybe that's the reason. But it's a quite great variety of studies that actually have students based on prior learning. I want to say something about exemptions as well, because it's possible also to use prior learning as basis for exemptions to get a shorter study period. It has been stated in the laws for many years, but we were quite uncertain as to what kind of degree they actually used this exemptions method. So we had a survey, a national survey in 2011, where we asked all the university and university colleges if they actually do exemptions. And not very many of them do. Only 12 respondents out of 72 or 57 said they actually did some exemptions. But 200 applications, and 198 of these 200 were approved. So if you actually get a student to seek exemption, there is a lot of work to be done, and those who actually deliver documentation is quite good. So it was successful for those who actually did deliver an application. The survey showed that it's not very much used, and it's not very much asked for, and that's maybe because I think the university and university colleges, they don't tell the students about this possibility. So some of them said that, well, no one asks for it, so that's why we don't do it. And then we said, okay, but do you inform about it? Do you tell them it's possible? No, we don't. So insufficient information. And also a problem for the institution is that it is a lack of incentives, maybe, because the finances for the institutions are partly based on the students taking their exams. And if they are exempted, they don't take their exams. And then the institutions don't get their money. So even though the ministry may say that, okay, but you can get another student to take the same course, and then you don't need to lose the money, then it's all the same, it seems that it's a way of losing money in a way to do this validation for exemptions. So we have some challenges there. What we also discovered was that many of the institutions didn't know how to do it, so they didn't dare to start, because they were afraid that the fellow university would say that, okay, you are not serious enough, you give exemptions to students based on prior learning, what is that? And so many of the institutions are uncertain how to do it, and they want to have good quality, and they are not sure what to do. So based on this survey, we made a guideline for exemptions in higher education. And this guideline we developed in cooperation with the representatives from the sector. It was very interesting work. And we had discussions and seminars through around the content of these guidelines. And these seminars were very interesting because it was very useful for the few people who actually worked with this to meet across institutions. This is not possible to read, and it is in Norwegian, but what we did in this guideline was to make a very simple structure and tried to show the process, what kind of points you have to go through. And we also put up a kind of matrix on the different roles and different tasks you have to do, whether you are a student, an administrative person, or the professional, what you call, academic staff. So just to get an overview and sort of starting point to understand what this process is about. We also had some pilot projects to try out these guidelines and to do it in practice. And we had 4 institutions participating with a pilot project. And I will say something about their results. The Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU, which is in Trondheim, they developed some procedures for exemptions. And I'll just click them through. Yeah. They decided that the student and teacher administration together decides which program is it relevant for you to seek exemptions, based on what kind of prior learning you have. So they had individual discussions with each student. And then the student worked a lot with documenting competence. The student may be interviewed, asked to write a paper or something like that. And then afterwards, the student delivered an application for exemption, and the procedure for this application was according to the normal procedure in the institution. So that was one of the results from the project, that they made these kind of procedures. For the Oslo and Akershus University College of Applied Sciences, which is in Kjeller, just outside Oslo, they developed routines for these applications, how to treat these applications. And they decided that the teacher, which is actually knows the subject and so on, goes through this application from the student and then decides and gives a proposal. Propose what kind of exemption is relevant based on this documentation. And then this proposal is presented to a committee for exams. I don't know if it's recognizable for you, but you have Utvalg for Studentsaker in Norwegian, which is responsible for setting up exams and doing certain special treatments from different students. And this committee concludes based on the proposal from the teacher. And then the student receives an answer. If it's not passed, then the student only gets an email. If it's passed, they get a letter describing the exemption. And then the result is registered accordingly, because if it is accepted, then it is registered in the formal register system in this institution. And just to look at one example as a text, as this is an approved application, and this student has been told that he has the approved width, the width of, yeah, it's hard to pronounce the word, and the approved depth in the subject. And they state what kind of documentation the student has delivered. He has been a sound technician, he has been experienced as a light master, I don't know what's in English, producer of photo. This is obviously a subject related to some kind of managing cultural things, I don't know. So they state what is actually the basis for this exemption. And on the basis, they see that this depth and width equals and exceeds the requirements described in learning outcomes in 2 subjects, and then they list the 2 subjects. So in this particular case, this student got exemption from 10 study points, ECTS, and 30 in one subject, and then 30 from another subject. So this student got 40 ECTS points exempted based on this documentation. In this way, they follow a procedure which is quite formal and easy to look into afterwards, both from the student's point of view and from the institution's point of view. So if they are asked from other institutions, they can say, oh, okay, here's a proof. This is what we did, and this was the result. And it's quite easy to look at afterwards. University College of Southeast Norway, they had also a project, pilot project, and they developed an internal form for how to document competence, which they used locally. And they experienced that the learning outcomes is quite hard to use sometimes, because the learning outcomes, they are understandable and written and all that, but when you actually want to use them as a criteria for the validation of a practical prior learning, it's quite hard. So they experienced that the learning outcomes may be not very usable in this context. So they had to sharpen up the learning outcomes a bit as a result. And they also saw that the more you work with this, the more experienced you are and the more secure you are in how to do it. And then the last pilot project had an interesting example, because they wanted to use this as a recruitment procedure. They wanted to go to unskilled workers in childcare and say that, okay, you can start as a student with us, you can get a lot of exemptions because you have a lot of prior learning, and then you will get your exam quicker than you would have if you had to start from start. But they didn't get any students because they didn't want to study for different reasons. So it was a good idea, but it was not possible to go through in this project anyhow. But that's also an interesting system of recruitment, that you actually can tell students that maybe it's not as long as you thought, this student period. Yeah, and all these challenges I will not say so much about, because we have already said a bit about it, but the last point there have been mentioned earlier, the skepticism internally. How do we validate prior learning, and why should we do it? Why don't you just take the exam? Why don't you just enter and do as every other student? And how do we secure the academic quality in our university? So we have heard a lot of skepticism towards this method, but I think it has to be implemented in our modern society in a way, because the different students have so many different backgrounds, and they need to have their competences assessed and validated if it is good enough. That is, we have to maintain the quality. So this is my conclusion. What is good enough? How do we ensure quality? That's the two main questions, in my opinion. To develop routines and procedures internally is useful, and also share experiences and discuss challenges. So meetings in some way to discuss challenges, I think, is very important. And now the last picture. We have made a short film about validation of prior learning. It's not validation of prior learning, actually, it's just prior learning. What is it? So you may follow the link when you get home, if you get this on emails or something. And it's a quite short film, 4 minutes, and it's quite funny. So look at it if you have time for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camilla. And for our last presentation, we have somebody from Sweden, Per Sellberg, and he is a specialist at the Department for Trade. What do you call it in Sweden, in English?
The Swedish National Agency for Higher Vocational Education.
The Swedish National Agency for
Higher Vocational Education.
That's a mouthful. Okay, but he's one of the guys who was, you saw a roadmap here for validation of prior learning for the Nordic countries. He's one of the guys who's been writing that. And we're going to get some information on what's going on in Sweden in this area. Please, thank you.
Thank you. this is what it's all about, of course. And this is me. And I will say something about, first, our agency. It's not an agency in higher education. Vocational education, higher education are separated in Sweden. So this is an important distinction to make right away. So I'm actually outside the system of higher education. The second part is I'm actually a saddler. So this part about validation and validation inside higher education, it's a little bit of an outside view, so to speak. There will be very little numbers, very little years when things happened, but more of observations, because we have had the commission to support and try to help the development of validation of prior learning in all the national systems, in the adult education, in higher vocational education, higher education, in the trades, they develop the validation models too, and so on. So it's a very broad field. And I want to mention that before I continue, so you have the right view. And this is a little bit about the official picture. According to the official picture, you see the dark green countries here. They have the furthest developed systems of validation of recognition of prior learning in like officially, and it said they have guidelines and policy for assessment and recognition of prior learning as a basis for access to higher education programs and allocation of credits towards qualification and or exemption from some program requirements, and these procedures are demonstrated applied in practice. So, I mean, if the official picture is correct, why are we working with this? It's a good question. But it's a little bit more complex than this. First of all, prior learning, as in all Nordic countries, encompasses informal, non-formal, as well as formal learning. That means that you can choose a little bit what you want to emphasize. And of course, in a formal context, formal learning is always valued, the highest, has the highest value, so to speak. Then, of course, prior learning should be recognized both for access to higher education and and it should be accredited for exemptions according to regulations. So this kind of regulations has been there for quite some years. But there are weak incentives, and this is not working properly in Sweden. And as stated of other speakers, the higher educational institutions, they risk their funding when doing this, and students don't get their funding when doing exemptions, for instance. So it's a bit complicated when you come to the very practical side of it. And of course, the higher educational institutions, they are their own authorities in Sweden. Most of them, they are autonomous. And the practice vary a lot. And it varies according to if they have policies in this area and if they have competence in this area. And I would say if there is mainstream is that it's being done in Finland, mainstream is that it isn't being done in Sweden. The exemption is that it is being done in the correct way. So this is quite problematic. And many institutions only recognize and accredit previous formal learning because it's the easiest to do and the most reliable to do. That's very important for higher educational institutions, the reliability of the assessment. So if you don't know how to do it with non-formal, informal learning, it's too unsecure, so to speak. So even moving from one institution to another studying the same program can mean problems for the student. You don't get accredited for all you have done in the previous institution. And it's often said that recognition of prior learning is the equivalent of validation of prior learning, but that's not completely true. I mean, there is no mentioning of validation in the regulation of higher education in Sweden. So recognition of prior learning should be like the same. But validation puts the individual in the center and always has an exploring approach to prior learning. And it's quite different from how recognition sometimes is applied when you're performing according to set standards without regard to individual ways of displaying prior learning. And the difference can be immense in practice. I mean, if you imagine me being validated for my knowledge in mathematics, if this is being done in Swedish, I will get 1 grade. If it's done in English, I will get probably a lower grade. If it's done in Arabic, I won't get any grades at all. So what is validated, actually? Is it language skills or is it mathematics skills? And this is, I mean, the way you test things do have an impact on the results. And also the quantity of recognition of prior learning is quite low. The government has noticed since they took away the old rule called 25-4, that is 25 years of age and at least 4 years of work-life experience. And they had a quota for admission to higher education. So it was quite used, quite big numbers. They took that away, and the numbers decreased dramatically using prior learning. They have now a kind of test for, it's called Högskoleprovet. It's a test you can make to get points, and you have a quota for this if you have made this kind of test. But then all tests have their pros and cons, so to speak. So the Swedish government wants to raise both quality and quantity of validation of prior learning into higher education. So there has been some commissions before. One of them was the extended right to teach in extra subjects as a licensed teacher within the teacher's further education. And they used validation of prior learning there. It was a commission coordinated by the Stockholm University. And it was quite interesting. We were also in that working group. And it resulted in a web-based administrative support system called Valda. And it's handling the process of accreditation for exemptions. The problem is it's only accessible for higher education institutions, so you cannot just go into it and see how it works. But it's a process that is quite similar to the one that Camilla showed from Norway. It's a quite standardized process, and you have all the support during the process. So this is quite interesting development. Another one is validation of professional skills for access to the vocational teachers program. This has been working for some years, and it's the Malmö University who is coordinating this program. It's coordinating some 7-10 universities, something like this. And they have chosen the level of experience and skills at the level 5 in the Swedish qualification reference framework. And it's the same as 5 in the European qualifications framework. So they try to validate people's experience from working life on level 5 for admission, and they don't have any education in the vocational skills during the program. So it's very important to get this right, because this will be the end exam for these vocational teachers. So this is also an interesting project, and they have had a lot of struggle to have a unified view on how to do this. But then there are new commissions too, and of course the situation, the international situation with the refugees is one factor in this. The government is investing some 30 million Swedish crowns each year now during the period of 2016 to 2018 to support development of better methods of validation of prior learning within higher educational institutions. And it's the Swedish Council for Higher Education that is coordinating this commission. So this will be a quite interesting journey, I think, for many higher education institutions. And the government is too investing in more complementary higher education for people from other countries, for them to be able to get licenses in regulated professions, amounting to up to 340 million Swedish kroners in 2019. So they are expanding the programs, because validating is one thing, but to make complementary education is as important if you want to reach the goal and be able to get out in working life. So these are some of the investments we're doing now. And the Swedish Council for Higher Education has also been commissioned to propose a model for validation of prior learning within higher education, higher vocational education, with the purpose to support recognition of foreign qualifications that are undocumented. That is quite interesting too. And the same model should also work for accreditation of prior learning, to get exemptions for those who have interrupted education and want to continue without having to start all over again. And this models should be able to apply also to persons, ordinary persons, in the continuing use of them. So it's not only for these target groups. And the pilot project is planned for this autumn, so it will be very interesting to see if the government will decide for this. So the Swedish Council for Higher Education have left a report and proposed how this should be organized. So these are some of the actual development on this area right now. So though we have, in one way we could say, we have the setting that should make this possible, but you need much more to make it work and to operate it. And this is the experience I think we all share, that it's not that easy when it comes to practice. So, thank you very much for listening.
So thank you very much, Per, and thank you very much to all of you who have presented information here. Ég sé það heilmikið hreyfing í herberginu. Klukkan 20 mínútur í 5. Það væri gaman að fá smá umræður, en það spurning hvort að þið nenni því. Má ég sjá, ég nenni. Ok, það enginn sem nennir. Við skiljum þetta búið að vera mikið af upplýsingum og við erum alls konar skuldbindningar heima og svo framvegis. Við vonum að þið hafi fengið mikið af góðum upplýsingum. Við komum til með að koma öllum glærum og slíku á framfæri við ykkur og við komum örugglega til með að bjóða ykkur aftur til samtals. Þetta verður langt ferli þar sem við þurfum að gera allt vel og prófa okkur áfram. En við hlökkum til að vinna með ykkur og ykkar samstarfsfólki. Ég segi þá bara takk fyrir í dag og góða stund.